Now, you could be forgiven for thinking there is only one human being on all of planet Earth. Certainly, the media is rather obsessed with at least one human being who kind of makes it feel like she's the only person in the world. You know who I'm talking about.
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift.
So much of it. Right, now, I've got a little girl, I've got two little girls, and they love Tay-Tay, right? So I'm completely across all the joys that are Taylor Swift, all right? They're not going to be going to these concerts, they're too young. When she comes back, whenever, they'll get their chance to do it. But, the reason I start the show with this tonight is there was perhaps the dumbest opinion poll I've ever seen, but it was done by some people who I kind of trust their polling, which says 79% of Australians are not interested in Taylor Swift and don't even know who she is. So if you are somebody who is sitting back going, who, what, it's okay. 80% of the country's with you, right? Now, I get it. For the 20% that are in, they're all in, all right? But how's this? 66% of 18 to 34-year-olds are not interested or have never heard of her. 75% of people between 35 and 55, no idea who she is or don't want to go and see her. And 94% of people over the age of 55. So relax. You are in the majority if you are, well, a little blank space, dare I say, about Tay-Tay and what's going to be coming in the next little while. But I get it, it's a big thing, and the people that are into her, they're in, but just relax. But there's more detail from that polling organisation I'll get to right now. Now, as we know, the Prime Minister has apparently won the battle when it comes to the too little too late tax cuts. He's won the battle when it comes to the breaking of promises. And how do we know that? Well, because people in the press gallery have been telling us, like Laura Tingle over there at Channel 2, who was telling us that what looked like bad politics in the end was genius politics, as she wrote in the AFR, that media theatrics over stage 3 tax cuts obscure a good policy choice. And the same people who did the Tay-Tay poll, well, they were out there last week telling everyone that 1 in 2 voters back the stage 3 tax cut changes. But of course, there's one question that no polling joint bothered to ask because, as we often talk about, many people in the media are about narrative, good guys, bad guys, winners, losers, the packer-whacker resuscitation of the Prime Minister who was sputtering like a clap that old car at the end of the year. But finally, somebody has actually done a poll about how do Australians feel about breaking election promises. Well, the essential media organisation that published in the Turnbull Times, the very same people that were trying to turn around and tell us that 1 in 2 were okay with it, well, guess what? 53% of Australians say, and I quote, "It is never acceptable to break an election promise." Never acceptable. So what we're going to learn in the next couple of minutes is the great gulf between those that talk about things in the Canberra bubble, those of us that try to pop the Canberra bubble each and every night, and the extreme majority of people who will eventually work out that despite the spin, despite all of the cheering on of the government, it is too little, too late when it comes to actually doing anything about cost of living. But interestingly here, let's have a look at on Party Breakdown, where people are about broken promises. Now, here, Labor people, 60-40, say it's okay to change your positions depending on the circumstances. 62% of coalition voters say no, hell no, there's never a good reason to break an election promise. 52% of Greens say it's okay. But 59% of people who are independents or third-party voters, and these are often the people whose preferences get to decide elections, they say, by a margin of almost, 6 to 4 there, 60% to 40%, that no, it's not okay. Interestingly, when you break it down by gender, there is one group in particular who do not like broken promises, and it's ladies. While 52% of blokes say, yeah, okay, we get it if circumstances change, 58% of women have told The Guardian today that under no circumstances can you break a promise. Now, also what is interesting here is the assumption being that, remember, the narrative is all women are leaning left and therefore all women are going to agree with the lies that come out of the Prime Minister. Well, apparently young people too, supposedly, they couldn't care less about these things. They're the ones that are that's right. 60% of 18 to 34-year-olds say it is never acceptable to break an election promise. 55% of people between 35 and 54, now those two demographics are the majority of the electorate, say it is never acceptable to break a promise. 53% of people over the age of 55. But as we know, there has been nothing but this conversation since the parliamentary year started. It was the entire ramp-up of the week to Australia Day, and it dominated the first week back in Parliament. So much so now that there's barely conversation about it that happens in question time. And the media, of course, has done their best to sell the government's version of this story.
Tax cuts.
Tax cut. Tax cuts.
Tax cuts.
Tax cuts.
But here's a little dose of reality. Certainly for those of us that talk about politics all the time, for people who like to watch politics all the time, and for the media who think that what they say goes. 53% of Australians apparently know very little or absolutely nothing about this policy. They don't know why, they don't know who wins, they don't know who loses, they don't know how much it is. 53%. And again, have a look at the age breakdowns here, where more than half of 18 to 34-year-olds, more than half of 35 to 54-year-olds know hardly anything or nothing at all about the tax cuts. Even a majority of people over the age of 55 know hardly anything or nothing at all. So perhaps the Prime Minister is not in gravy right now. Perhaps he is not through the worst of it. Because while he will be saying, I've done something about cost of living, remember the talking point to Labor MPs was that this was the solution to cost of living. Well, I'll give you the tip. When the majority of people start looking at their pay packet per week, per fortnight or per month, they're going to work out too little, too late. $15 a week is how little this thing can end up. Or for the mean income earners of Dunkley, it's $14 a week. Yeah, good luck taking that to the by-election saying tax cut, tax cut, tax cut. How much? $14 a week. And of course, none of that touches the sides if you're paying off a house, like most of the people are in Dunkley. You need an extra $14,500 to pay off a $500,000 mortgage since this bloke became Prime Minister. $21,000 for $750,000 owed, or $1 million above. $29,000 that you were not paying to pay off your home before this bloke became the Prime Minister. So fascinating to see. Despite all of the conversation, the obsession, the who's winning, the who's losing, most people have no idea about the detail, which means I'm going to bet when they start to see the dollars, they're going to go, what? That's if they notice it at all. So perhaps the Canberra bubble may not have been able to protect the Prime Minister from too little, too late. One more thing about these polls too, which show us where the primary vote is for the parties, and the likelihood is that if the Labor Party wins Dunkley, which at this stage it seems they probably will, despite all the obvious reasons why the people of Dunkley should be sending a message about the too little too late from this government, the ALP has a primary vote of just 31%. That is down, by the way, from the last federal election where they only just got there. The Liberal Party is at 34%. Now, they really need to be above 35. To be honest, they need to be at about 37 and above to be able to start thinking about forming a government. So again, we're talking about most likely a minority government. But there's one number that all of us should be afraid of because we all watch the policies and the personalities of the Greens. Their vote is up to 14%, and 28% of 18 to 34-year-olds currently plan to vote Green. Now, this matters because, of course, Green preferences help get Labor MPs elected. But if there is a surge in Green votes, they will end up with a higher primary number in some places than Labor, and the preferences will work for the Greens, which means you'll have examples like what happened in the seat of Brisbane at the last federal election, where it went from the Liberal Party to the Greens. Labor's preferences ended up propping up the Greens. And to give you an idea of why the Greens are in a position to be able to start to grow their vote despite their insanity, and I get it, there is one constituency that if the Greens can get just a portion of this group, they will lift their primary vote, and that is renters. Now, according to the census from a couple of years ago, pretty simple, 31% own their house outright, 35% have a mortgage, and 30% of people are renting. The queues that are currently there, that no one is going to be able to solve before the next federal election, all are potential Green voters who are promising solutions to a problem that they won't be able to solve. But if grievance becomes a reason for people to not vote for the government, then for many people they will be looking to the left and the Greens. Now, they know they're nutty, they know they disagree with them on a whole bunch of other things, but if they are seen to be the only party that cares about renters, well, then they're going to end up getting the vote. So my suggestion is to both of the major parties, but obviously the right of centre ones that we would prefer to end up having the power because they are, frankly, either less insane or more sane than the current mob that's currently there. They have to come up with serious policies for renters. Now, it's not just about the idea, as previously has been the logic inside the Liberal Party, that every renter is somebody who's dreaming of owning a home, so let's try and do everything we can to create policies to buy your first home. For many people in Australia, they're nowhere near having the deposit to buy the house, so their circumstances as renters matters.